us out?
Yes, and Shannon, I went ahead and hit the record button. I wasn't sure.
Perfect.
So we're recording now. Just to let everybody know we are recording. Yeah, I wanted to thank Shannon for giving me a couple minutes here to kind of preach and talk before we dive into the information. This is going to be a pretty lengthy call. It will be recorded in case you want to go back and listen to bits and pieces of it or the whole thing. And for, I'm sure we have some offices, some employees that are not able to attend today. I know we've got some weather issues around and other things going on as well. You know, last year in 2021 was probably the most challenging CRP year sign up that I've experienced since I've been doing this. You know, we started off sign up under 55 and 56 and things were going great. And then we were told to stop and we had to hold off for a while. And then we got all those changes that came down in June of 2021. And then, you know, county offices had to go in and redo offers all over again. So 2021 was just, you know, a massive challenge for CRP PTs, for our CEDs, you know, not to mention our other programs that are going on due to COVID and everything else that's going on. I was so hopeful that sign up 57 and 58, we were going to be able to have a, you know, somewhat normal, smooth sign up. But that kind of came to a crashing halt today when we got the info bulletin that offices, this is nationwide, not just Indiana, are to stop processing sign up 57 and 58 offers right now due to the erodibility scoring that is going on in the system for the new ranking system that has been put in place for our CRP offers, and specifically general, but we also use that erodibility calculation for some continuous practices as well. So as you can see, we're off to another challenging time here under sign up 57 and 58. You know, these past couple of years has been a huge challenge for everybody, the FSA, NRCS, IDNR, ISDA, soil and water. We're all going through changes, these, you know, working from home, trying to communicate with producers, getting our work done with deadlines and reports. And it's very, very stressful. And I know Kayla here at the state office, she's been doing a good job of representing our agency and pushing out information for, you know, stress relief and everything. And I know it can build up and anger can build up. And then I'm reminded that how things can change in an instant. And I'm very close with somebody that I'm sure many of you have heard of the tragic events that took place in Monticello about a week ago, of the fire that claimed 2 lives of a mother and a daughter up there in Monticello. That community is devastated. And again, I'm very close to somebody who was the best friend of the mother who passed away in that fire up there. And it just puts perspective on, as challenging as we have it here, FSA, NRCS, everywhere, any workplace, private sector, government, you know, life is precious. We need to do what we can to keep our stress in check level, make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, our families, and our producers at work, because we never know what the future holds for any of us. So that little speech kind of leads me into with the workload of CRP. And I know we always preach about making sure that we communicate with our NRCS counterparts, IDNR, our foresters, the biologists, soil and water, and our ISDA Crp coordinators. this joint guidance that we're going to share today, I am very excited for what NRCS and the partners have agreed to do on these status reviews to get us out to 23 and 24, 2023 and 2024. One of the biggest complaints that we heard when these new 100% status reviews came into effect was the producers don't have enough time to correct deficiencies that are found. And yes, we agree with that. This new process, the joint guidance today that we're going to cover, will hopefully alleviate some of that, giving producers 2 or more years to correct deficiencies that are found. And, you know, another complaint that we've actually heard from county offices and producers as well is, you know, it's not fair. You've never looked at my practice before, but now you are. But one thing we have to keep in mind is when these participants come in and sign these CRP contracts, it is very specific and laid out word by word in the appendix and in the conservation plan that they are responsible to maintain that practice. And unfortunately, we have a lot of practices around the state where producers come in, sign up because they specifically just want the money. They want to get a cover put out there, and then they don't want to touch it for 10 or 15 years. And that's not what CRP, conservation, you know, it's not what EQIP is for. I know that's an NRCS program, but it's to maintain those practices so that we get the benefit out of it or what they're meant to do out there. You know, here in Indiana, we paid out around $38 million in annual payments in 2021. That's a lot of money. I know it's not as much as some of these other big relief programs that are going on, but $38 million is nothing to shake your head at. And when we're paying out that much money, we need to make sure these producers and participants are held responsible for maintaining these practices so we get those benefits for water quality and the wildlife out there and protecting our soils. So with that said, again, we need to make sure that we keep an open line of communication with NRCS and our other partners. As whenever sign up gets opened back up and we can start doing these offers again, I would highly suggest that, I know we have some offices that do this, that keep a manual tracking report in Excel, or maybe they do it by hand of offers they have. They put the farm, the track number, the producer name, the practice, the acres, when it gets sent over to NRCS. And then when it comes back, that report gets updated. I would highly recommend that offices do some kind of tracking report like that. Share that with your NRCS counterparts and IDNR and Soil and Water. You know, here's what we've got for this month. We've sent over this many offers. We've sent over 20 offers. You've gotten 10 back to us. Here's the 10 that we're still waiting on. That way you guys in the field can keep that open line of communication of what's pending out there. And then as we move closer to our sign up deadlines, if you're in a situation where you have 25, 30 offers that you still may be waiting on plans back for re-enrolls or general practices that get accepted, you start that communication with them, you know, with your CED, also the DD. And then if it gets to a point where it looks like we're going to have trouble getting stuff done, if we have that report in hand from your DD, we can easily share that with Shannon here at the state office. And we can say, hey, Shannon, here's what we've got. Shannon can take a look at it and see if he needs to allocate resources to help an office get plans done and back in time for re-enroll, general signups, and new practices as well. So I know we always say this because we don't want to rule with an iron fist here at the state office. You know, we spend more time at work with our work family than we do with our own family. So we all need to make sure we're getting along to get these producers serviced and get their conservation on the ground. And it'll just make for a much better situation all around. But again, if we do have situations that crop up, you know, start that line of communication with your CED, DD, the area conservationist, and if need be, up to us here at the state office as well. So I know I'm preaching. I probably get a lot of eye rolls on that, but I just want to make sure to get that word out, and I'll turn it back over to Shannon.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Just a few housekeeping items as well. If you have a question, you can either enter it in the chat, or you can raise your hand using the Teams features. I'm not going to go through those in general. I think we all have used Teams long enough to know how to do that. Jason will be monitoring the chat and the raise hands, and you can always unmute yourself as well and ask a question. But we do ask if you don't have a question to ask, to please stay on mute. And Jason will take care of that as well if you forget how to do that. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks again for that great message, Jason. I echo what Jason said. We have an outstanding relationship at the state office, and I know you all at the local office have outstanding relationships too, and that's what this is all about. Working together as a single USDA voice, especially when we have clients who are not too pleased with them. I have to say they're not too pleased with themselves for not maintaining their CRP practices and that they got caught. How about that? No, again, we're here to help those clients get the great conservation out there through their CRP contracts, and that's what this is all about. And working together on that is the only way we're going to get it done. So I will go ahead and start today. Here you can see the topics that we're going to cover today. We're like Jason mentioned, this is a long meeting. We will take breaks periodically, or at least one break, possibly more. But anyways, just hang tight if you would. We will do the best at about the top of each hour to take a break, a quick 5-minute, and hopefully keep you all well engaged. And again, this is, if you have questions, please get them out there. Chat, unmute, raise your hand, so on and so forth. NRCS employees likely already have heard this enough that they get it. I just want to make sure our partners at the Farm Service Agency and other partners who are on kind of understand another stressor out there hitting our farmers and even our employees. It's this thing called the highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. It is a devastating disease that impacts birds of all sorts, wild birds, as well as domestic birds. Confined turkey operations all the way to a backyard guinea. It's very highly transmissible, and it has been found here in Indiana as well as other states. And because of that, I just want to share, especially with our FSA partners, that effective when we sent this out February 10th, our employees are not to step foot on farms that have birds, whether that's, again, a backyard flock or a confined operation, or even on fields that have recently had poultry litter applied. So again, we know this is an interruption of our services to them, but we are more used to virtual service of our clients than we've ever been, and so we're going to keep that service first and foremost and the customer experience outstanding. But we're going to have to find alternative means if that farm does have birds on it. And again, as I told our NRCS employees this morning, we'll be coming out with additional guidance on this as well. But I just want to make sure everyone's aware. If you hear a farmer saying, "Well, NRCS won't help me anymore," it's like, well, okay, it's for the benefit of your birds on your farm. We don't want our employees to become a vector and spread the disease. And there's a low risk of human infection, but as we know, things happen in nature. This also does apply to you if you are working on our behalf. So if you are part of a contribution agreement that we are paying you to help us with our CRP workload or other workload, this also applies to you. DCs, if you have not shared this with your local partners, please be sure to do so. And again, we can find unique and alternative ways of helping these clients. Again, here's where we are right now. In Indiana, we do have 5 affected facilities, 3 in Du Bois County, 2 in Greene County. That's resulted in over 150,000 turkeys being what they call depopulated. And if that word is new to you, that means they are no longer alive, and they are also not in a freezer or on someone's plate. They are disposed of by other means. USDA NRCS does not have authority over animal disease. That is USDA Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service, APHIS. So but we are there as part of local partners as needed to help farmers and go through this tragic disease, and hopefully we'll be out of it soon. If anyone is interested in getting the latest up-to-date information in Indiana, you can go to the Indiana Board of Animal Health website and click subscribe for email and text. And every time there's a new infection or if things are getting better, they've been very good at informing the public as well as the partners. It's the best way to keep up to date. So with that, are there any questions on highly pathogenic avian influenza? All right, hearing none, we will continue. If you've heard me talk a lot, you know that I'm a proud pup dog owner. This is our new pup. This pup, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but hey, we got a new one in the family, new family member. Bear with me here, as I thought I was better prepared than this. Okay, so moving on to CRP status reviews and our joint guidance. First, I want to talk about our workload. Thank you. FSA, you all have an outstanding data system now that is relatively new, but it's really helped us manage this workload and plan it out. You can see here pay attention mostly to the Indiana totals here. We're looking to do a lot of site reviews this year for CRP. As Jason mentioned, the status reviews. We're also doing our practice certifications. We're doing new offer planning, re-enroll offer planning, so on and so forth. So we have these data. We will be getting these to you. They are not. We have issued preliminary data, but we'll be getting you an additional official set of data that you can help manage the workload. We can also, looking at just the maintenance or the establishment status reviews, we can break these down by discipline, whether it requires an engineer or a wildlife biologist or an agronomist. And so again, we can dice these data down to the best of our ability. So Jason mentioned, some offices have a tracking system. We will be getting this information to you. This will be the list of the status reviews that we'll be completing this year. And again, we will only be completing status reviews for practices that are on the list we give you. Okay, so I just want to kind of cover that. We'll cover that maybe in a little more detail. And so, any questions on the data that we have? Okay, Chris Morse, are you on by chance?
I am.
Would you like to give a brief demo of the tool you've developed with those data and how it's going to help our field staff and partners?
Sure thing. So we've put together a little web app. I've started sharing screen. Are we a little slow here today, Shannon? Are we getting anything yet?
Yep, I see you.
Okay, so seeing some network latency in the last 30 minutes compared to this morning's meeting. Not sure what that's about, but we'll persevere. So we've created this web app for our employees to use as part of looking at the CRP practice reviews. And we've loaded up the CRP practice list that we were given based on a late January copy of the CLU. We were able to match up most of the practice records to the CLU. There was 400 or so, Shannon, I think, that we couldn't, that we know which ones those are, and we will be able to communicate with our staff to follow up on those elsewhere outside of this application. But this is just going to give our folks an overview of where things are in their county, let's just say. So I'm going to zoom in somewhere. There's nothing really at the state level except counties. But as you zoom in, you start to see the tracks that have practices, which is indicated by this tracks layer that's turned on here. And then the practice reviews layer is kind of behind it. We'll see that as we zoom in further. This layer list and other things come from this toolbar along the bottom of the screen. So normally it's not even there, but if you need to see it, you can click this pancake stack of layers and turn off, for example, the tracks that contain practices and continue zooming in further to see practices. And as you do that, you see that they are labeled with what practice they are. Also on the I'm just going to call it the toolbar for this call. At the bottom, there's this 4 tic-tac-toe kind of diagram here, 4-panel diagram. That's going to let you change your base map, so we can change over to imagery if we need to. This is pulling from the digital globe imagery on ArcGIS Online. So it may or may not be NAPE, it may or may not be recent, just kind of depends where you are. The select tool from the toolbar will let you pick a practice, for example. It'll highlight blue. We're kind of familiar here with GIS activities. So this app, web app, is the same way. If I click these 3 dots, I went too fast. And if I click edit, our users get a little form that pops up that asks them, was a site visit complete on this one? The defaults are no, but if they change them to yes, that is saved immediately, or I'm sorry, it'll prompt you if you want to save. If you scroll down, there's a save option. And let's just do that again. I'm going to select it. I'm going to click it to yes. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click save. And then I'm going to close this little pop-up. And you can see the color has changed. So purple to us means like, hey, site visit's complete, but the documentation's not complete. So if we went in there again and marked that the documentation, whatever it is, relevant to the particular workflow for the review, is done, and change that, it changes it to green. So if you zoom out to your county view a little bit as someone at NRCS or partner that may be looking at this, you can see which ones you've done and which ones you haven't yet in sort of a map view. You can turn on the streets-based map to kind of plan out a route to go inspect practices in a quadrant of your county if you needed to. Also, you can populate the reviewing agency for who did the work. We've got NRCS Field Office in here, NRCS Conservation Delivery Team, Pheasants Forever, Soil and Water, DNR, ISDA, or other. Now, some of these other partners are not going to have access to this system. To get access to this system, you need to have EOF level 2, and you need to be able to access GeoPortal. At the moment, the only FSA employee that I'm aware of that might have access to this would be Chris Soonpa. So Chris, let's you and I talk if you think we need to expand that access any further on your side of the aisle, if you're here today, or if anyone can get that word to Chris. And that doesn't change the colors. That's just for us to, kind of tag it with who did the work. This is optional. Shannon, do you want to talk about those aspects of the use of this before I talk about the last few things?
Yeah, like Chris mentioned, this is going to be an optional tool. Our employees are not required to track completion using this tool, but again, if it helps you, that it's at your disposal. Well, we will be getting this out to you soon. And with
this
other
is out,
instructions.
Shannon.
Okay.
We can share a link. This is ready.
Okay. Yeah, we'll officially put this in your hands, and with a few instructions if Chris needs those, and some other things like that. So, and as Chris mentioned, he was not able to directly link up all of the CLUs with, or the practice CLUs that we have in the data set with the CLU layer. And so there are some practices that are not on here that you'll have to manage separately.
Couple more quick notes. There is a bookmark tool in here where you can drag all these little windows. And if I click add bookmark here, it's going to add this little local view as a bookmark for me, and I can type in a name for this bookmark. And no one else should really see this bookmark. At least I've tested with our users. I don't see their bookmarks. Maybe they see mine because I'm an admin, but I don't know. Also, you can, if I zoom somewhere else, and then if I open my bookmarks and click this little arrow, oops, sorry. If I click on it, it should take me there. And then if I click this X, it'll delete the bookmark. And then there's a measure tool as well. Be very careful with these measure tools. These are just for gross estimates. These are not for precise measurements. They're just to give you an idea if something is grossly off. So if I draw that 40 there, it's about 40 acres. If I draw lengths, I get lengths. Pretty straightforward stuff. So those are the primary features. There's also filters, and we've given our folks the ability to filter these results in certain ways. So yes, I'm going to filter this layer, and the layer that is filterable or able to be filtered is just the CRP practices layer. So if I only want to see the practices in, I think I zoomed in Putnam here, I could go down to Putnam and zoom out. And you can see outside of this area, around to the north and the west, I'm not seeing practices. And this is by where they're administered, of course. And then if I want to do by where they're located instead, I can do the next box, clear out the first one and do the regular county. And this is geographic county. We've also got filters for whether they completed site visit or documents. The workload type, like Shannon alluded to, is in here: certification, establishment, maintenance, and re-enroll planning. So if there's particular types you're looking for, you can filter that. And the expertise as well: agronomy, engineer, and wildlife. It's pretty straightforward. The home button down here will take you back to the statewide view. That's about it, Shannon. Anything else you can think of?
No, just thanks a ton, Chris, for pulling this tool together. And I think it'll really help us manage that workload very well. Just a couple of questions came in the chat, Chris. Says, Chris, you've said that this is a web app. How do we access this to use it? Will there be instructions on how to use it?
Okay, so we'll send out a link. What you need is you need to be, if you're an NRCS employee or partner with eAuth access, you're going to need access to GIS States or GeoPortal. These terms are being used interchangeably, and I'm managing, there's actually two servers. I'm managing them both the same. But if you've ever heard me say either term, they're both the same thing. GeoPortal is GeoPortal for national layers. GIS States is another portal for state layers. And we kind of leverage both. What I do there, if you're an NRCS employee and you've done the computer setup and you've asked, especially for GPS, and you've asked for access to GeoPortal in the Indiana groups, I have given you permission and you are a member of those groups. So when we send out the link to this, if you cannot access it, we will be sending you instructions of how to request access to it. And that basically all you need is link pass if you're on your computer, and it'll get you in once we grant you that access. This is also available, I didn't mention, in Collector, our Collector app for our NRCS folks, specifically for our NRCS folks. Partners are going to have, I think, most likely limited to no ability to use Collector in this capacity due to device reasons, basically, is what it boils down to without going on at length about it. We issue devices that can get through the VPN to our employees, and therefore they could view this map in Collector on their phone. If you're happening to switch to field maps already, if anyone's ahead of me in the game out there, it's the same thing as Collector. It works the same way if you set it up the same way. It just looks a little different. This map is in both applications, and you can download offline areas in both applications. Use most likely if you have eAuth. If you can use CD through eAuth or LinkPass, you can use this.
All right, thanks, Chris. And one other question from Cindy. This is more to me. Was the preliminary data shared with everyone? It has not been shared yet, Cindy. It has been shared with the area conservationists and resource management specialists. And then on the Division of Forestry side, it's been shared with Brenda Hooter and Zach Smith. So, but we will be getting that data out to everybody. I'm only going to be sending it to NRCS and FSA employees. And then again, that's up for you all to share with your local partners and manage that workload accordingly. I have also shared it with the leaders within DNR, Division of Fish and Wildlife, and Pheasants Forever. Okay, not seeing any other questions, Chris, so we'll move on. Thanks a ton.
All right, I will stop sharing and relinquish control. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's dive right into the joint memo. We can find it here. Of course, we can find it. All right, thanks a bunch, everybody. As you are familiar here in Indiana, we like to put a lot of information out in your hands. As Jason mentioned, you know, we like to have a consistent approach to how we tackle CRP. Again, it takes a whole partnership, Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and our partners to get the great conservation on the ground. There's always something that we don't address specifically, and it's a gray area. I mean, we don't want you all to struggle locally on how to do something or how to make a sound decision. So we try to put this out so you all can refer to it and communicate jointly. Just as a reminder, I talked about highly pathogenic avian influenza. As you know, COVID-19 is still among us. So again, use all that. We took that statement out because it's just kind of business as usual anymore. But of course, employee safety and client safety is of the utmost importance. Use every means possible to get this work done at your disposal. So be smart, be safe. Another change that we did this year, if you remember last year, we sent out a whole packet of information for establishment status reviews, and we sent another one out for maintenance status reviews. This time we just combined them together. And again, the reason we did that last year, DNR Division of Forestry does not do maintenance status reviews, so we thought, well, they don't have to worry about that. But instead of having two sets of data or two sets of information that's very similar, we rolled it all into one. Okay. So I'm going to say this, just again, things just to make sure we don't forget. This information typically gets issued to all NRCS employees, all FSA employees, and then our partner leaders who are key to our CRP here in Indiana. We please share it locally. If it's Soil and Water District, they may not get the message from me. DCs, please share it with your soil and water districts. ISDA leadership, please share it with your field employees. Josh, share it with your Division of Fish and Wildlife folks, so on and so forth. Zach and Brenda, share it with district foresters. I can't maintain email lists that way, so I do rely on you all to please share that with other employees. Okay, a couple of key due dates, and just like last year, we are considering the end of the calendar year for the due date for these status reviews to be completed, and that would be the complete set of documentation to Farm Service Agency, as well as issued to the client. Now, I guess I'll have to say, please don't wait to the last minute if possible. This is a huge workload. You saw the GIS map, and that, just as a reminder too, what Chris showed was more than just the status reviews of CRP. That was the practices that we know need to be looked at some manner this calendar year. Those being, again, the status reviews, re-enroll, potential offers, practice certifications. We know not all those will require a site visit, but you have a geographic representation and can manage that workload as best as possible. So anyways, December 31st, 2022, this is the due date for the NRCS DC to deliver completed practice maintenance status reviews to FSA, and the same due date for NRCS and the Division of Forestry, District Forester, to deliver establishment status reviews to the FSA CED. And just as a reminder, NRCS has technical authority for CRP practices that are not forestry. DNR Division of Forestry has technical authority for the forestry tree practice. Okay, now you can see them listed there. So we get the question all the time, hey, can I work on a CP3A from an NRCS employee? My answer is always no, you don't have technical authority for that. But if by chance our district forester is out or incapacitated, we've always communicated FSA and NRCS to the state office, always communicate that to DNR Division of Forestry leadership, and we find a way, they always find a way to get that service. So again, we all have enough workload to do, but it does take great communication. All right, just again, as background, why are we doing these status reviews? Again, this is dictated at the national level, and we get our funding, NRCS gets our funding, DNR Division of Forestry gets their funding from National Farm Service Agency. Okay, there's two MOAs, Memorandum of Agreement. One is between FSA National and NRCS, and as part of that MOA, nationally, they have agreed that NRCS will look at these practices as we're going to lay out. Similarly, National FSA worked with the U.S. Forest Service to work out an agreement of how the U.S. Forest Service will service CRP tree practices, and the U.S. Forest Service delegates that down to the state forestry agencies, and so that's where that authority comes from. And that's who makes the decisions, and that's what we do. As I mentioned, NRCS, we do receive significant CRP funding to get this workload done. That comes from Farm Service Agency National to NRCS National. and given to the states to get the work done. These funds and this work is critical for the resource as well as for your employee status. I can't say it any more clear than that. Let me see, where am I? I'm sorry. So in all cases, though, you know, as NRCS, we know we can't get all this workload done just with the staff we have and all the other workload we have to manage. So we do work with our partners. With some of those, we do have funded contribution agreements to help reimburse our partners to help us. Others are again out of the kindness of their hearts and joint goals, such as the State Department of Agriculture. You know, they take care of the Crp for us and work in partnership with us there, and it works out real well. So we can, again, use our partners, and we do. However, I have to remind ourselves, for the non-forestry practices, NRCS, we are the ones who are responsible. So if we have a partner helping us, that's outstanding. However, we need to be the main communicator between FSA and us and the partner. We should not have FSA communicating directly with our partners to help with the CRP workload that you're responsible for. That needs to go through you. And if things don't go quite right, you need to help right that ship. Likewise, Division of Forestry, you know, the district forester is the one who's responsible with FSA to get that work completed and delivered on time. Okay, let me stop there and see if there's any questions on that concept.
Just one question in the chat, Shannon, on 4Ds, CP38 4Ds would still be NRCS, right?
Correct. Yeah, because that would be a CP38. Oh shoot, is that a B or is that a D?
E. CP38 E.
Yeah. So CP38E is an NRCS practice. The only safe DNR Division of Forestry practice is CP38C. Very good question. Okay, we're just going to walk through the guidance that was sent out. You have this in your hands, but we're just kind of hitting the highlights and giving you a chance to ask questions as they come up. We did highlight in yellow the changes from last year's guidance. Okay, so you know, even though we have a 3-hour meeting, there's still not time to teach everyone how to do a status review per se. So if this doesn't meet your needs, reach out to your area staff and others, and we'll make sure we give you additional training as needed. Some of the key changes, we'll go through those as we come to them. Again, practice maintenance status reviews. These are the ones that we are looking at by the national MOU. We are to look at these contracts in either year 7, 8, or 9. So we have a choice, but we have to review them 3 years prior to expiration. Okay. The DNR Division of Forestry is not looking at CRP contracts that are set to expire. They do not do maintenance status reviews. That's not part of their national MOA. Okay. As Jason mentioned, this calendar year, NRCS leadership, and we worked with our partners, we agreed that we will look at 2 years worth of maintenance status reviews. You know, when the MOA first got updated from the 2018 Farm Bill, we were only looking at practices within 1 year of expiration. Okay, and we knew, as Jason mentioned, we knew that gave, if a farmer had a compliance issue with CRP, they didn't have very much time to fix the issue, right? So we're going to use this year as a catch-up, and we're going to do contracts that are set to expire September 30 of 2023 and September 30 of 2024, all in 1 year. So that's a huge amount of workload, and I showed you those numbers. But we think we got the partnership in place. We're getting this information out to you. We think we can get that done. And what that'll then do is allow us, moving forward, to start looking at practices that are set to expire 2 years prior to expiration. So farmers will have at least a full growing season plus to correct issues if we find them. I shouldn't say if we find them. If the farmer didn't do their maintenance properly, they will have 1+ year to fix it versus a portion of a year. Comments or questions on that? Okay, let's move on to establishment status reviews. And again, these are, again, part of the national memoranda of agreement, and both Forest Service and NRCS is these are included in those. These are where we're actually verifying, did the installed practice, is it established? So here in Indiana, we're going to look at these in the third year of the contract. So that's pretty much 3 growing seasons if that client was able to establish that vegetation at the first growing season of their contract. Okay. So again, we've rolled the guidance of both those together. And again, Division of Forestry will be doing those for the
Yep, Shannon, one popped in here from Andrew in Covington. Question number 1 of the day: if there is a forestry practice expiring, who looks at it?
Nobody. Unless the client calls up and wants some technical assistance on that, there is no requirement for Division of Forestry to look at those contracts that are within 1 year of expiration. Now, caveat that if that practice is eligible for re-enrollment and the client offers that contract for re-enrollment, then that will be a review by the Division of Forestry for the re-enrollment purposes, but not for a status review purpose. Good question. All right, let's keep moving. Now here, I have to point out something. This is a lie. This said attached. That's not true. You do not have the list. We will get that to you soon. But just the key point here is that when we get you that list, that will be the list that NRCS or Division of Forestry is expected to work on. If you think there's other practices that fit the definition of what we should be looking at and they're not on that list, that's fine. We're not going to add, we will not add practices to our list based on local knowledge. Okay, so don't even look. Questions on that? Great. And you will hear my puppy throughout this afternoon, and I hope you enjoy that because this is her playtime. Uh-oh. Okay, let's see. We already kind of went through this. Established status reviews are started in 2019. Maintenance status reviews expired in 2023 and 2024. The practices we have in the list will be based on the physical county location of the practice. So for those of you who may, I'm talking to FSA folks here, that may be administering contracts for land that's in another state, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Kentucky, we will not do the status reviews for those. We if you remember, we have a joint agreement with our surrounding states that NRCS will only service program contracts for CRP as well as compliance only in Indiana. Ohio NRCS will take care of those, so on and so forth. So I say that if those will not be on this list, and so you'll have to work with other states to get those completed. On the same token, NRCS here in Indiana, if we get a request from another state to look at CRP acres physically located in Indiana but administered in another state, we will be able to add those on as well. Those will not be in this list. Again, if they're administered in Illinois, we don't have those practices in our list. But you may get a request to do that. I'm not going to ask. So I'll tell you that much. But if another office in Illinois or Ohio or somewhere reaches out to you, definitely let us know how we can help. But otherwise, we are responsible for that. Comments or questions on that concept?
Yeah, a couple of things coming in, Shannon. First one: what in the world are you doing to your dog? Is the first one there.
That's why I said this is her playtime, and so she's on me.
And then I got a couple more popping in here. First one: is there a resolution if you NRCS Sydney and Greenfield. I'm going to kind of do it from the FSA side, and then Shannon, I'll let you, if you want to add to it. So if we have a status review that has come back with issues, if the COC has determined that they are out of compliance, the FSA is going to issue that letter, our non-compliance letter to them, and then that producer is going to get their timeline of when they have to respond, and also notifying them that they need to correct the deficiency. If they don't agree with that, they have the opportunity to appeal to our county committee. So that would kind of be, there's so many different scenarios that can take place on that, but that's kind of the basic, most common one. So Shannon, I don't know on your side, like if we have somebody who's specifically questioning an NRCS DC about the status review.
That's a good question, Sydney. And I think we'll cover that in more detail later when we kind of get to that step of the process, if you don't mind waiting. And we'll kind of go over that, make sure we answer your question then as well. We can read what we wrote and see, make sure it makes sense. Thank you for that.
Yep, she said okay.
Cool.
And then last one I've got right now, are the DCs responsible for cross-referencing the list against what the soil cons have already pulled? In years past, there have been discrepancies with the list not being complete.
Yeah, I think that's the same answer that I just said. We are only, just to make sure I'm clear on that. FSA and NRCS and DNR Division of Forestry leadership have agreed that the list that we will give you is the only ones we will look at. So there should be no discrepancies. And I guess, I'm you may have a preliminary list. You may have started doing some work, pulling some stuff together, but that's why I said wait on the official list. Make sure we give you the sanctioned list so that we don't do any more or any less of what we are required to do. Consistency is the name of the game, what we're shooting for here, okay? Good question, good question.
That's all I got.
Great, great.
Oh, hang on. A couple more popping in. So does that mean there may be expiring contracts that are not on the list? I'll take that from the FSA side. There is a possibility that if a contract was in revision status that happens to be expiring this year, that it may have not made the list. Now, I don't know how. What we did was we tried to hold off as long as we could after fiscal year, once we rolled over to 2022, to kind of let a lot of the recons and revisions to CRP 1s get done. Now, I know CRP, we've got revisions going all throughout the year, so there may be a handful of contracts that don't make the list because they were in revision status. So that would be the only ones there. And then we have another question. What about a tract that has a 99 field on the list and then has 10 fields on that tract?
Yeah, that's a good question. That designation, that negative 99, is kind of a placeholder in FSA's system, and it appears that those are some of our older contracts that have multiple fields enrolled, multiple practices. Let's agree on this. All CRP practices are in FSA's system as a common land unit or a field. Okay, so when I say practice, it's the same thing as a field, same thing as a CLU. There is a specific CLU for that practice. Okay, so there will be multiple CLUs on that tract that will need reviewed. So that's a very good point. And so in all honesty, the numbers that we will be giving you and that I showed you are lower compared to what reality is. So yeah, that's something that, again, you'll have to work.
All right.
Any other questions?
Nope, I think you're good.
All right, cool. Okay, moving on here. Again, when we get to that list, we are going to ask the DC and the CED. Now, when I say CED, if you delegate that down to a program technician or someone else, that's perfectly fine. But the DC, you are responsible to go over the list for your county with your FSA counterparts and have a discussion about it. And if you find errors, if you think there's errors, like we just mentioned, if the contract's not in there or whatever, reach out to Stephanie, Alexander, and myself. Copy Jason on that too. I would suggest, and we'll either agree to skip it or agree to add it. Okay, but that decision will come from the state office. I guess I just want to make sure that's clear. So anyway, that way we have consistency. There are a couple caveats to status reviews. If, again, I'm talking establishment status reviews right here, we included all of the tracks that that started in 2019. All the practices started in 2019 for the establishment status reviews. Now we know maybe back in 2019 that was a re-enrollment, and there was no problems whatsoever with that re-enrollment. Instead of having you go out there and looking at the grass again, if you guys decide locally to not have to go out and do that, consider it done. No status review needed. Okay. But we can't tell at the state office level if it was re-enrolled in 2019, if work had to be completed, reseeding, reshaping, regrading, these sorts of things for re-enrollment, then we do want you to go out and verify that the work has resulted in an established practice. Okay. Now, and we'll show you an example of this. We also, the big thing we do want to make sure is that client gets the CRP operation and management worksheet. Because again, that's, I guess I have to say, we're taking the stance that, of course, it's the client's responsibility to maintain their CRP practice. However, most of our CRP planning of the past may not have given the level of detail to the client to where they fully understood, oh, I have to keep this species off my farm. I have to, they should know they had to control erosion and reestablish vegetation if it didn't get established, but they may not have been aware of what we consider an unapproved species. Okay, that's what we started doing a couple of years ago. We want to get all of our CRP clients to know that and start maintaining their properties accordingly. So we will at least send that O&M sheet to the or I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. We will send an LTP 13 that everything should be good and include the O&M sheet, and we'll call that one good without a field visit. Okay. And again, we say in there, if DCs, if you use a partner, that is, again, still your responsibility to maintain that work and ask for help where needed. But then again, you are the one responsible for making sure it does get completed. And similarly, for Division of Forestry, FSA and Division of Forestry need to have a conversation about the list. And again, if the same thing applies, if it was a re-enroll back in 2019 and there was no problems with it, pretty much, if you agree locally to assume that it's in good shape, no need to make another site visit. But we will still, again, send out the 13 and the O&M worksheet. Comments or questions on that? Okay, and we'll go over this in a little more detail, but again, talked about that December 31 deadline. That's when all final documents should be delivered to FSA to consider the status review is done for this year, and then we'll work on 2023 as soon as we can. Okay, general comments or questions on what I covered? Okay, let us move on real briefly to this document. And again, this has the same look and feel as we always have. So we'll cover some of the highlights here and then we'll take a break. So first, step one, again, as we mentioned, the state offices will give you the list of practices to do a status review on. Okay, that's the official list. If you have issues with it, contact Stephanie and myself and Jason and or DNR leadership, and we will make a decision for you at the state office level. All right, so NRC, you can see we have NRCS or DNR. I think we know DNR, you're doing the tree practices, establishment ones. NRCS, we're doing the grassy, non-forestry ones. you know, we do need to make a site visit unless it meets those criteria we outlined in the memo. And then based on the site visit, we'll complete the LTP 13 and the Indiana status review check sheet. Now here's a change that we did not communicate last year, but it is something that was a huge oversight for us, and it's highlighted for you. If we find an issue, we need to give FSA the exact acres of where that issue is. Okay, that's something we didn't have in our last year's guidance. We have it this year. Again, you're out there on site. Give your best estimate of measure of how much, you know, where is the Canada thistle at, or you know, how wide of a waterway is the farmer now cropping? You know, if there's an erosional gully, about how big is it, and then also identify that on a map. And by all means, when we find any issues, take photos, because again, this is an adverse decision, and FSA has the authority to issue penalties, terminations, these sorts of things based on it. So we want to make sure we have that, all the good documentation, and also too, well, I'll cover that later, but we also need to make sure we agree locally that the issue that we found is worth the next step of correction. Okay. Now, Jason, do you want to go into any more details on the importance of the measurements and locations of these issues?
Yeah, just a couple things here. Yeah, we know this was kind of we got reports of this being an issue scattered throughout the state last year. So hopefully, you know, we addressed those with those county offices. We know that there were a lot of county offices that were getting pictures and acres, and our offices were able to easily identify and calculate the standard payment reductions. On the FSA side specifically, our maintenance default rates for the amounts to charge for standard payment reductions, that's going to state committee here in March. Just to let you know, there's going to be no changes on that from previous years. Those dollar figures and multiplications are all the same as they have been for quite a few years now. We didn't see any need to, again, make any changes. So that's going to state committee in March, and we'll get that pushed out in an updated amendment for 2 CRP and the CP handbook as well. So again, no changes there. One question I did get on assessing the SPRs as it relates to getting measurements and acre issues back was on tile holes. If you remember, that kind of came up as a question, and we needed to figure out exactly how we wanted to assess penalties on tile holes. We are not making any changes to what we issued last year. It is in a everybody has it again, but if there's one tile hole notated out there, we're going to still send them a letter of non-compliant or compliance issue that they need to fix that, but we're not going to assess them standard payment reduction for one tile hole. If there's 2 or more, that's when we're going to assess the penalty on that. And again, I'll get that information pushed out from that those weekly call notes so that everybody has those there. If when you're getting these status reviews back with these, hopefully with the measurements and pictures and the areas that have an issue, if you get some back and they happen to be missing acreage on there, again, I'm going back to that whole line of communication. Just go back and say, hey, look, we got this back, and I see we're missing some acres on this one. Could you just get that updated for us? The other thing is when these are done by field, if we've got a CRP contract, I know I dealt with one when I was in the field that was in INNRCS County that had probably about 30 to 35 separate CLUs for waterways on one farm. That could easily be where we get 1 or 2 of those fields missed. So if you get it back and you're missing a field or 2, again, it's just a simple communication back over saying, hey, looks like we missed a couple of fields or missed a field here. If we could just get that updated on that. Had a couple questions pop in here. First one was, how does this relate to those that we already know do not want to re-enroll? Inspection needed. So the list that everybody's going to get for NRCS and FSA with these, those are required to be done per our agreement with NRCS and Division of, I know Division of Forestry is not doing those, but with NRCS. So those are required to be looked at regardless if they have indicated they're going to re-enroll or not. Now, if it's a forestry practice, and those aren't going to, forester is going to go out and look at that, but if they don't want to re-enroll, it's not going to get looked at. So any of these that go over, even if the producer thinks or has indicated they're not going to re-enroll, they still need to be looked at. If there is an issue, those still need to be sent a non-compliance letter. They're going to, get the same as anybody else who may get re-enroll as wanting to re-enroll as well. So there's not going to be any separation there. Those are all going to get treated the same. And just to let everybody know, on the NRCS side, Chris Morse popped in there with a message about collector users. So you guys can pop in there and take a look at that from Chris. And then we have a question here. Shannon, I'll let you answer this one. Can the inspectors include a list of species found even for those in compliance? This would help for general grass practices to determine which points the existing cover qualifies for. We've seen some where the local staff wrote original plantings on the map, but we didn't always receive notes if all species were found during the inspection, and it's the difference between 10 points or 40 points on the EBI scoring. So I'll let you answer that one, Shannon.
Yeah, right now we are not requiring that. We're just saying, yeah, the cover that is out there meets the original planting intent and the current field office tech guide standards and CRP requirements. So I guess I'd have to say, if that information is important for a producer re-enrolling a general sign-up practice, I'd say just ask, and we can likely tell you. And or I guess I'd say this too, there should be a record of what the original point value was for that and what was originally planted in our USDA files. And if we said it's still in good shape, it should meet however it applies to the N1A point values. So I guess to answer your question, I'm going to say no, we won't require that on all cases, but definitely work in partnership if that information is important for a specific contract. And I'm sure we can work together to find the right answer for you.
Another question popped up here. If FSA does not receive the LTP 13s until December 31st, how much longer should we give NRCS to supply missing info, photos, measurements, etc.? I'll answer this from our side. We cannot impose a deadline for NRCS here. Here at the state office, Stephanie and I can't say, Shannon, you must have this stuff back to us by such and such date. We work together to come up with these dates, the December 31st date. So I think hopefully the majority are getting those back timely where they can get those addressed. If you are getting some, we know workload and time constraints, some, we don't get plans back or these back until the last day just because of how much workload there is. If you are getting some back on the 31st that are missing some info, that's just got to be that communication back saying, hey, we would like to have this back as quick as possible so we can work on getting non-compliance letters out with notification for, what the acreage is, how much they're going to be assessed a penalty for. So Shannon, I'll let you speak from your side as well on that.
Yeah, again, you communicate locally, communicate frequently, and NRCS, we know what is a complete package. Don't send an incomplete package over. Make it complete. And again, I'm speaking mostly to our NRCS folks, but I know we have a lot of partners on here. I'm going to have to stress NRCS, even if we have a partner helping us, you are the one who's responsible. So if a partner is helping you and they don't give you all the information that FSA needs, you need to work with that partner and make sure we get that pulled together. And again, it's communication at all levels. NRCS and partners, FSA and NRCS, and DNR, Division of Forestry, rolled in there as well. So hopefully we won't have many of these just dumped on you on December 31st, 2022. I guess I'd have to say, talk locally and see if you can come up with a better approach. But yeah, if there's issues, we need to supply that NRCS, so we need to get that to them as quickly as possible. And I have to say this as well. That December 31st deadline, like Jason mentioned, is an Indiana deadline. We are trusting you that we are doing the work together that is in the national MOU. We are not asking you to report and track this for the state office. We're trusting you locally that you will work this together and make sure we adhere to the national MOUs and do the job that we've agreed to do. So I'm kind of saying we don't want to track it because we trust you, and we'll leave it at that.
And I'll tell you, I mentioned at the beginning of the call about, keep track of these. You both are going to have the list of everybody's going to get this same list. Keep them marked. When they come back from NRCS, mark them off, and maybe once a month just send over a status update saying, hey, just wanted to give you a status update. This is what we're showing that's completed, and this is what we're showing that's still pending. One other question here, Shannon, and I know we've talked about this before, and I'll let you kind of talk on your end of this, but LTP 13 forms are to be completed per CRP CLU or per CRP contract. And I know we've had that conversation about having those done field by field, but I'll let you expand on that.
That's a great question, Tim. And we're leaving that up to you and at your discretion. Again, when we are relying on our partners, and if it's through a contribution agreement, practice. So you may end up with 10 LTP 13s for a track that has 10 waterways on it. But then we also know, and we do that for multiple reasons. One, so again, our partners can better track what they've done with us, and so we can adequately reimburse them. And also, there are some CRP contracts that have multiple different practices. We may be asking our soil and water districts to help us look at a filter strip and waterways, but now we have Pheasants Forever helping us with a pollinator habitat on the same contract. So again, having them separate is great. It's fine. It's not required. But if they also want to combine, if we want to combine our review into one LTP 13 and put 10 fields on there, that's fine too. It's at your discretion, whatever you think is easiest for each specific contract to get the information to FSA. Any other questions, Jason?
Nope. I think we're good to go.
Good. All right. Hey, let's take a break here. I think it's a good spot to just take a quick break. Let's take a 5-minute. I'm not fancy like Jennifer. I don't have a timer down. Jennifer, if you're on, if you could slap that up. If not, that's fine. Let's do our best to be back here at 2:15. Sound good? It's a rhetorical question. Take 5. Okay, we got about another minute, then we'll get started back up. All right, let's get back to it. Appreciate all those great questions, and let's keep moving on through this process document. Again, hopefully understand the importance of the exact measurements. Again, FSA may have to penalize or standard payment reductions to these farmers, and if it's not the entire practice, then it's just only on the acres that has the issue. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, moving on down through here. Again, NRCS or Division of Forestry, you folks are responsible for these. We'll have you sign the LTP 13s. And again, that can be signed by any means. It doesn't have to be blue ink or black ink. It could be electronic. But again, this is just your acknowledgement to FSA that you you agree with what's on the LTP 13 and the check sheet and all the other stuff. Again, even if a partner completes that for you, you are taking on responsibility that it is complete and accurate. Okay. For NRCS only, if we don't have a record of these practices in Conservation Desktop, we want you to document those. Again, that way we have a complete record of all the conservation that we have out there. For the most part, we should be in good shape. But again, if you know for a fact it never got into Toolkit in the past, let's put these practices in Conservation Desktop and report them as applied. Okay, next step 4A. This is for 13s without deficiencies identified. So the farmer's done an outstanding job of maintaining that practice. These are the ones we hope that we start getting a ton of, more so than ones with deficiencies. We do want to make sure that the primary contact at least is aware of the fact that they're doing good, as well as if they don't already have an O&M monitoring worksheet, that they have that as part of their CRP plan. We left this flexible. We're not saying that NRCS, you have to collect the signature, DNR, you don't have to collect the signature. Anybody can deliver this to the client by any means possible. Again, if we know this client will be coming into the office to report acres or do something like that, let's work it out with Farm Service Agency that, hey, put this in their file, and when they come in for other business, we can hand them the LTP 13 and congratulate them on job well done, get them up to speed on O&M. So again, we've left this flexible, but we do need to make sure the primary contact does get a record of this. So again, work that out locally, and however the best way to do that, we will definitely make sure that those farmers get those forms. Let's move on. 4B. Okay, now we have them with deficiencies. Here's the key to this. If we find a deficiency, and again, let's just make sure we're on the same page here, that there's erosion on the CRP practice. It's narrower than what was originally enrolled. The species diversity is not there. There are an unapproved species above our thresholds. Those are what we call deficiencies. We hope we don't have many of these, but we know that we do. The key to this, we need to have a conversation. Okay, FSA and NRCS and any partner that might have done the work, likewise FSA, Division of Forestry, and any other partners that might have done the tree practice work, have a conversation. That's where these photos come in handy, all the other good documentation. Because again, if this could be a very personal judgment call. It should be a technical, by the book, everyone has the same answer, but we know that's not always true. What's an issue to one person may not be an issue to another. So let's have a conversation and agree that it may take another site visit with FSA and the DC and anyone else. Pull on your area staff and other experts if you really want a solid opinion on, is this a problem? Yes or no. Make that decision jointly. This should not be an NRCS decision. This should not be a Division of Forestry decision. It should not be an FSA decision. It should be a partnership decision that, yeah, this is the next best step for this contract, and following policy, as well as all the other things that come with that. I'm going to stop right there for effect and questions. We have a question, Jason?
One just popped up. So LTPs without deficiencies only need to go to primary contact, not all shareholders.
That's what we agreed to, yes.
Yep.
And again, I'm going to speak to our partners out there, our contribution agreement partners. We are not going to get into the details of the agreements in this call. As we have in the past, we'll send out additional guidance. That is one thing that we are going to be evaluating, is you all delivering LTP 13s to clients. We're going to probably rein that in and make that a USDA function. More to come on that. It's a good question, Mary Lou. I'm seeing the chat, Jason. Is that a change from last year? In all honesty, I'd have to go back and see what we put in here. as far as all shareholders without deficiencies versus primary contact. I don't think that was a change, but it very well could have been. I'll follow up on that. Good question. All right, let's move on then. Okay, so we're with deficiencies. So again, that conversation is so key. And again, NRCS, if it's one of our practices, you need to initiate that conversation with FSA, or FSA and NRCS initiate that conversation. Bring in any other partners that may have made the site visit. Please go out to the farm if you need to definitely agree. And let's not take issues and rubber stamp these things. This is very important to make sure we make the right decision, because this is an adverse decision that is the unfun part of CRP. So we need to make sure we do it properly. Okay, the next step then is FSA will send a letter to all CRP shareholders where we have a deficiency, giving them that documentation, the LTP 13, the check sheet, photo support, everything else that goes with it, along with the O&M worksheet. Again, this is where now it's an official adverse decision, and so this is big. But FSA will send those letters to all CRP shareholders for deficiencies. Then again, as we highlighted, this is kind of a change in the order of how we had it last year and getting it more in line with 2CRP. Okay, so first step, send that letter. All CRP shareholders will be requested to provide an explanation to the county office and county committee as to why the practice is not in compliance. And again, this is one of those things that's important. If it was one of those things that was beyond the client's control, drought, flood, bugs, you name it, then that's a very important decision, very important piece of information. If we didn't already collect that while we were out in the field working with that client, this is their chance to really explain what went wrong and why. Again, if it's still adverse, well, let me not go there yet. If it's something that's not right with the CRP cover, the client still needs to fix it. Okay, so they need to respond to the letter, and then if number one, if they respond and they are willing to correct the deficiencies, then NRCS is the technical authority for non-forestry practices, DNR Division of Forestry for the forestry practices. We will provide any technical assistance that client needs to correct the issue. To CRP, good faith doesn't come in until after the client fixes the problem. Okay, so I'm just going to walk through this here real quick, and we'll stop and ask questions and kind of go into more detail. So we identify an issue. Locally, we agree it's an issue. FSA sends the letter. Client responds. We provide technical assistance to correct the issue as requested. Client then makes the corrections. Then it's back to NRCS or Division of Forestry to verify that the corrections were done properly. And again, I'll go into more detail on that. We may not have to make a site visit if it's not. Well, here we go. All practice failures will require a follow-up visit. Practices that had erosion issues will require a follow-up field visit. But for other situations, such as unapproved species control, these sorts of things, if you can rely on the farmer to take a picture of their efforts and you're okay with that, then you don't need to make another site visit to verify that the correction has been made. Okay, if all is good, or regardless, really, we will create another LTP 13 and or update the existing one to reflect, okay, the issue has been resolved, and get that back to FSA. For repairs that are satisfactory, this is where the county committee can then make a determination of good faith or no good faith. Okay, and then working on down through the process. So comments or questions on that?
Yeah, Shane, we did have one question that popped in, and I'm gonna kind of pop back up a little bit up to 4B and then kind of go down just like you did there for ones with deficiencies. And as we talked about, without deficiencies, we're looking at just the primary contact, which most likely is going to be the 100% shareholder, or if it's a 50-50, whoever's been designated as a primary contact will get, the copy of that. When we look at LTP 13s with deficiencies, the notifications need to go to every shareholder. And we talked about this at the beginning when these new, the 100% status reviews went into effect. So if you've got a 50-50, if you've got a third, or 25-25 shareholders on there, each one of those need to be notified by letter of the compliance issue. And I think our urgency on that was if it somehow ended up through the appeals process and ends up at NAD, and NAD sees that one of the shareholders did not get notified by letter, NAD is most likely going to find fault in the agency for not following a procedure of notifying each shareholder. And we'd have to start the process all over again of administering a new LTP 13, sending out new letters, going through that whole process over again. So we want to make sure we get that done up front, that each shareholder is provided that notification letter if we have compliance issues. On 5, all CRP shareholders who respond and are willing to correct deficiencies, when you send them that letter and they have the 15 days to respond, each shareholder does need to respond. Obviously, if it's a 100% shareholder, just the one. If you have 4 people on a contract, or 5 or 6 people on a contract with a share, one letter can be submitted as long as all of them sign it. They don't have to do, if there's 6 people on there, they don't have to do 6 separate letters unless they want to. But if they are going to only do one, each shareholder needs to put their signature on that response letter. Hopping up here to one of the questions we got: if someone has deficiencies but does not want to re-enroll, do they still have to fix it no matter what? And this is going to be harsh, and I know because we're towards the end of the contract, and they don't want to re-enroll, so they really don't care what it looks like out there. However, we still care what it looks like out there because they are still getting an annual payment up until September 30th of whenever that contract expires. So if they choose not to correct that deficiency, that's pretty straightforward for the county committee to find no good faith. If they're not willing to fix that issue, I think that's pretty straightforward county committee decision there. No good faith, that contract gets terminated. Everything on the contract, including cost share, incentives, and everything. So want to re-enroll, it still needs to be fixed because they are still getting an annual payment on that contract. Next question here coming from Kim, NRCS and Versailles. If a practice is up for re-enrollment, does the seating have to match what was originally seated to meet current recommendations? Example, a CP21 was originally seated to orchard grass, timothy, and clover, but current cover is fescue. Also, for maintenance checks, does the cover have to match what was originally seated or current standards? Shannon, do you want to do that one on the old versus current?
Yes. Okay. So let's tackle the maintenance one first. So we're doing a maintenance status review. If it was originally planted to timothy, orchard grass, and clover, and it's now fescue, that is an issue. So the maintenance checks have to match what was originally planted. That, those species, that diversity has to be there, and fescue in that case would likely be an unapproved species. I think it's probably like a CP1 or something like that. So I hope that answers that question. So let me make sure I may have misspoke earlier. A maintenance check would not have to meet current standards. It would have to meet the CRP plan that was in place when it was originally enrolled. Now, going for re-enrollment, we're doing the same thing. To verify eligibility for re-enrollment, or for the past, it's the same thing. They have to have what was planted. If they want to re-enroll it, then they do have to meet current standards and current CRP requirements. So there could be a difference there. That, if the original contract only said to plant timothy and orchard grass, that they may be in compliance for their status review if they have timothy and orchard grass and no excessive unapproved species. But for re-enrollment, our new standard would require a clover, so they would have to add clover for when they re-enrollment to get up to current standards. Hopefully that answers that question.
And then if Shannon, if you have it open, do you see what her final question is there?
The 10% unapproved species, is that per practice? That one?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So then last question: the 10% unapproved species, is that per practice? Yes, it is. Like a large patch of fescue on CP1, overall 25% of the field is all fescue. Is that all out of compliance, or just the acres where the fescue is located? Jason, I'm going to answer that. That's why we need that exact measurement of where that fescue is located within that field. And if you can answer.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, if we've got a 40-acre, I'm just throwing out acres here. If we've got a 40-acre practice, but we've only got a problem in the southwest corner of the practice that totals roughly about five acres. That's why we need to know it's that section of the practice is out of compliance, so they're going to get assessed a standard payment reduction just on the 5 acres and not the entire 40 acres. So that kind of leads me into another question here to follow up on Kayla's question. Why are we making an annual payment? It's not in compliance. Wouldn't a standard payment reduction for the whole final annual rental payment? So if the entire acreage is out of compliance, if the entire acreage is covered in Canada thistle or, you know, whatever unapproved or noxious species out there, then yes, the standard payment reduction is probably actually going to exceed the annual rental payment, but we know we can't go higher than the annual rental payment, so they're not going to get that annual payment for that year. But in an example where if we've got that 40-acre field and only 5 acres is out of compliance, they're still going to get probably a pretty significant annual payment that year. So it's kind of a, you know, 2 different scenarios here where, you know, some of these are still going to get an annual payment if the entire acreage has not been affected. Going with Kim's question, is it 10% per field or per contract?
And again, it would be per field, per practice. And that's another reason potentially if you want to split out practices on a separate LTP 13. If you got 10 practices and one of them has issues, you can lump 9 onto one, but maybe issue a separate LTP 13 for the one with issue. Or 10 separate ones, whichever your discretion.
Another question here. So if a producer has let too many trees grow up but doesn't want to re-enroll, he still needs to clear the trees even though he is in the final year or no good faith. So again, you know, this is, we can't step out of there's just not much leeway here, if any at all, in 2 CRP policy. If they've let trees take over a grass practice, if it's a CP 33 or if it's a safe practice that was supposed to be herbaceous cover and now the whole thing is covered in brush and trees, and they are not going to re-enroll because they don't want to do all that work, I don't see how the county committee could find good faith on that. I mean, that shows a complete lack of maintenance being done. Actually, I mean, there is no maintenance being done if the entire thing is covered in trees or brush. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty simple decision of no good faith for the county committee. Now, you know, the producer always does have that option of requesting a waiver of refunds, and that would ultimately be up to your county committee. But again, if you're finding no good faith, I would also find it it would seem to be hard for the county committee to find justification to waive some of those refunds on that. But again, that's a county committee decision. Just kind of going on my thought there. Shannon, are you sure it is by field? I thought policy was by practice, by contract for the greater than 10%.
Yeah, let's make sure we're saying the same thing. Again, CRP practices are their own field. They are their own CLU. So I guess when I talked about if that answers the question, Ruth. So it is by practice, but each practice is its own field.
So for what Shannon is saying, if we've got a CP33 that's in 4 different CLU field numbers, it's got to be that greater than or less than 10%. If we've got fields 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're looking at field 1 individually, field 2, field 3, and field 4.
Yes.
Nothing else is popping up right now, Shannon.
Okay. All right. So any other questions before we move on to the next document? Okay. Hopefully the rest of this, we'll get through this here pretty quick. Okay, instructions. So again, you have an instruction document. A lot of this is kind of covered in the process, but it kind of goes into more detail. I'm not going to go into this in any great level of detail. It kind of tells how to fill out the LTP 13 based on the what we find out there. So let's see. Talked about the exact measurements that are needed. Cost share. Again, I don't know. Jason, is there anything you want to highlight on cost share? I guess hopefully our employees can read that and make sense of it. When cost share might be available when it's not.
Yeah, there really is no change here from last year on cost share. So if you do have individual questions about a specific case that you're unsure of if cost share may apply or not, you can always send those up to Stephanie and myself, and we'll take a look at those individually. But nothing has changed from last year on that.
Okay. Let's keep on moving. Again, FSA is the one responsible to communicate adverse decisions, but again, it's critical that we have those conversations locally to make sure that species. Okay, we've had this in our list of tools for quite some time. Indiana code has changed. Okay, if you remember, we always had our Indiana noxious plants list. That is a state law, and it was always Canada thistle, burr cucumber, Columbus grass, shatter cane, and Johnson grass. Okay, those have always been on Indiana's noxious weed list. Clients have been required to keep those off their CRP acres by their CRP contract. That's actually the exact language is actually in the appendix and other. That law changed in Indiana. Okay, they've now added common water hemp, tall water hemp, Palmer amaranth, which that used to be on our USDA unapproved list. Now it's on Indiana law. Mare's tail, likewise, that was in our previous CRP unapproved list. Now it is Indiana law. Poison hemlock, same thing. And then in Powell amaranth, rough pigweed. Amaranth is pigweed, but we got some of the common names they all have amaranth as a scientific name. Rough pigweed, Powell amaranth, and smooth pigweed. Okay. Now, this is pretty important because in most plantings, whether they be a tree planting or a native grass or any kind of grass planting and wildflower planting, likely mare's tail will be one of the first volunteer colonized plants that come into a planting. It's, the seed is out there in the crop fields and everything else. It comes on sometimes kind of strong when we stop farming. Well, it comes on strong, but farmers are able to control it if it's not herbicide resistant. They're able to control it out of their soybean and cornfields. But in our new plantings, we likely see a lot of mare's tail come on, and we very well may see a lot of water hemp as well. However, over time, as those grasses get established and start to outcompete, and trees start to outcompete the water hemps and the mare's tail, they fall out of the planting, or at least to acceptable levels. However, they are now regulated by Indiana law. So here's our guidance on that for now. And again, let me back up. Indiana weed law, noxious weed law, is governed by county weed control boards. Okay. The county weed control board has authority to require control of these plants on private lands. And they can require the farmer to control them, or they have the authority to control it themselves and then assess the farmer's records to get reimbursed for that. So it is Indiana law. However, like any law, it takes somebody to govern that law and enforce it. So, but on CRP, this is critical because it is actually in the contract itself. And so farmers are going to have to make sure they keep these things under control. So you can see we have a series of asterisks and pluses. So we, in the non-highlighted ones up here, we've always required, or we have 0% tolerance for those species. If it's on CRP acres, it needs to come off. These other ones, we're going to say they have to be controlled to 5 to 10% of the practice. And then the ones with the pluses are only after establishment. And again, both of these have a caveat unless a county local weed control board requires a different level of control, then the farmer, to be in compliance with their CRP contract, has to follow that county weed control board requirements. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Shane, we do have a question in the chat, but I think we're going to get it addressed in one of the documents here coming forward, so I'll kind of hang on to it.
Okay. So I do have some pictures of these things. I won't take the time to do that today since we're running behind. But again, most of us probably know some of these. The farmers probably know a lot of these plants. They don't want them in the crop. They control them in the crop fields. They also need to make sure they keep them controlled in their CRP plantings as well. Okay, now we also have, of course, our unapproved species list. This didn't change except for some of these species, like I mentioned, mare's tail and water hemp and palmer and poison hemlock came off of our USDA list, and now they are under Indiana law. So these have not changed. And finally, if we find a practice was incorrectly enrolled in the original contract, again, we would document that on the LTP 13 and communicate that with FSA and take action as needed. Comments or questions on the instruction document? Okay, let's make sure we go over a couple of the forms. The status review check sheet, again, this is your tool to help walk through everything that we need to look at and document all the important parts of that CRP contract or practice, excuse me. And again, this is kind of designed to be a practice by practice review. If you want to lump them and they're all the same, that's great. But again, typically, if you have more than one CRP practice on a farm, likely they may have different results. So use your discretion and complete this how it best suits you. So nothing changed here except for we say if the answer to any of these questions is no, we do need, again, the exact location and measurements with the issue. And as well, we need photos, all that good stuff as well. And again, remember, this is a 2-pager. On the back is your documentation of what we see for these unapproved species. And again, we kind of laid it out there of the tolerance levels for each of these. Comments or questions on the check sheet? Okay, let's move on to the form. Hasn't changed. Again, we can use one form per practice, one form per contract, whatever suits your needs the best and the client's needs. We're leaving that flexible. And finally, here's the good old O&M sheet. This does have a February 2022 date that as invasive species continue to expand into Indiana, I haven't heard of any past plant pest that's just kind of moving north or moving south and leaving Indiana. It seems like we keep adding to this list. Again, we hope we can at some point get good consistency, good communication to our farmers, so that when it comes time for a status review, we have a 100% pass, and when it comes time for re-enrollment, there's 100% no issues. And we're slowly getting there, but unfortunately, as things change, Indiana laws and other, it complicates our world. So again, Jason, I'm just talking to you. I haven't had this conversation with you. At some point, if we need to send this out to all CRP contract holders, I think that would make everyone not wake up that morning and go to work. But this is important. Making sure that our farmers understand this. And again, I guess I'm speaking to our technical leaders out there, NRCS Division of Forestry and our partners. Take the time to help those farmers understand what's in here and their responsibilities for maintenance. Again, when they see an issue, if they see one of these plants creep in, encourage them to get onto that right away. Hopefully we'll get into a business process where we are not finding these that have had 5 to 10 years of stronghold. Rather, we identify them early, take issue with them, get them under control, fix the erosion. If the farm hand accidentally planted corn in the grass waterway or sprayed the waterway, get on top of that, fix it up right now. We need to do a great job, just like we communicate locally amongst our partners. We need to communicate with our clients as well on the importance of maintenance. And this is a great tool to help you do that. Comments or questions on this? I see a question from Randy that I'll tackle here. So Randy, it's a good question. Will CRP policy on mowing be covered today? It should be. There is very inconsistent guidance, interpretation of what is allowed, especially outside of the establishment years. It's in this document. We weren't going to cover it specifically. Nothing has changed. Farmers are not allowed to mow for cosmetic or general reasons. However, if there is an issue with the cover, and we think that mowing is an option to control that issue, then we can authorize that mowing, even if it's in the nesting season. There's a process, and it's laid out here in this document. This is where we have to have that conversation with the client, that if they find an issue, they need to go to the county committee and get their approval, and also approve of the method. If they just want to mow it because they don't like the looks of it, no, that's not allowed. But if mowing could be a solution to a potential non-compliance issue, then there is a process they can follow, and they can. But likewise, mowing may not be the best treatment, and that's where the county committee and us and others can say, well, no, we're not going to approve you to mow, but we'll approve you to spot spray, or something to that effect. Or hey, you can mow, but you can only mow this part of your CRP acres because that's the only part that we have issues with. Hopefully we answered that question clearly.
Yeah, Shannon, I'll add to that for FSA and both NRCS as well. I mean, this is, Shannon, exactly what he said is exactly out of the 2 CRP handbook. That's paragraph 427 under maintaining approved cover. Periodic mowing and mowing for cosmetic purposes is prohibited at all times, even if this activity is included in the conservation plan for maintenance. So annual mowing of CRP for generic weed control is prohibited. So, if we've got somebody who's coming in year after year requesting to mow for Canada thistle, it's time to make that suggestion to that producer that you may want to take alternatives, seek alternative measures to eradicate the problem that you have out there. And also this, when they come in and request to mow and it goes through, that's not a free open door to mow the entire treatment only, and that's straight out of 2 CRP handbook. So that's there's no wiggle room there on that.
Okay, I'll take this question as well, Jason, from Randy Dix, or I'm sorry, Kent Hanauer. Why are mare's tail and some of the amaranth that are native species on the noxious weed list. Noxious weeds are a specific legal definition, and there's only 5 species on it. Yeah, good question, Kent. Actually, we stumbled across the update to the Indiana code, Indiana law, for another biosecurity issue with our employees, and we did verify that. Josh Griffin, I don't know if you want to speak up to this, but you did verify that that code did change.
Yeah, Shannon and Kent. I spoke with Megan Abraham with DNR, and that code did change. There's a varying degree of folks that are a watchdog over that, as Shannon alluded to. So it depends upon how stringent the county committee enforces that. But the code did change and include those other species which hadn't historically been there. So we'll see how that plays out. I think there's a solid approach here to have some allowance of 5 to 10%, especially for species like mare's tail that everybody knows we're going to see the first year, but it's going to be gone by year 2 or 3.
All right, follow up from Randy. So NRCS and partners should document mowing on a LTP 13, and FSA will treat it as a violation or issue of noncompliance. Yeah, if we notice improper activities, we should document that on LTP 13, and again have that conversation locally, and then decide what level of reaction needs to come to that farmer. Good question. Any other questions, Jason, we want to tackle now? I saw some others in the chat. Jason, you want to tackle those later?
It would help if I took myself off mute there.
Okay.
Sitting there talking to myself. There was still, I think one was more of a comment than anything. There are a lot of bald eagles in the CRP area with the trees, but we knocked them down to get them into compliance. I really can't add a whole lot to that, except, I mean, it's, if it's a herbaceous grass practice and it's filled with trees or some trees, yes, we've still got to address that issue out there. There's still one, Shannon, that I think we're gonna get covered in one of the other documents about older status reviews that were done 10 years ago, and some of the instructions and advice that were given in previous years. I don't know. I think we're going to cover that. I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay. So you can just work again, more information on this O&M sheet. Again, here's where we kind of tell the farmer about the mowing, or any maintenance activity is limited during the nesting period, but it can happen. They just have to follow the process. So hopefully we're clear on that communication. And again, there's a spot here just giving the farmer some good photos of what they can expect. And then here's their kind of self-check sheet, if you will. This is not required to be completed or returned to FSA or NRCS or anybody. It's just a walkthrough that helps them do their proper maintenance and review. Okay, so let's move on. We'll close some of these out so I can see what's going on. A couple other pieces of information you have. Again, the various conservation or field office tech guide practices that correspond to the CRP practice is a management activity required, and then some key pieces and parts to some of these point mixes and things like that. Just kind of give a reference for what we might expect to see, what was in that original planting. Nothing changed on this. I just want to highlight that it's available. That was that. Let's see. Practices criteria. Again, this is just another listing of what we'd expect to see in the variety of CRP practices listed out. So again, just things that we will check while we're out there on site. The final piece to this set of wonderful guidance is something that we issued separately before, but now we've included it here, and this is the status reviews follow-up. And Jason, I think this might be the document you were referring to, that we might cover some of these things here.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So again, very good points in the chat. I mean, you know, especially the one where I think I read one, Jason, where pretty much we find an issue with a farmer today that we never really told them they needed to fix when they originally enrolled or originally re-enrolled. That's a very true statement, and that's why we need to have these conversations locally with amongst USDA and our partners to say, okay, due diligence job in our original CRP plan, or is it the farmer just didn't do a good job of maintenance? So again, that's the conversation that needs to have and decide what is the next best step. Okay. So again, there's a difference again between the noxious weeds. I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's pretty well laid out in writing. And you know, we talk about the different tolerable levels, so on and so forth, and the difference between maintenance and LT and establishment. Again, you can read through this locally together. You know, come up with a common understanding of what we've given to you, and then react accordingly. So, Jason, anything you want to highlight? We've really pieced this out based on the various issues that might be found. Noxious species, unapproved species, also zip through it. If you want me to stop anywhere, Jason, just tell me.
No, I'll just kind of tag on to the, you know, like you mentioned before about if they not clear instructions were given to the producer back in the day. You know, we kind of had the same issue with wetlands, with tree stumps out there. We kind of had that same issue that, you know, we've got that issue cleared up where we've adjusted how we're giving that guidance out. But as far as CRP goes, like Shannon said, if you've got a producer that's out of compliance, you're working with your NRCS counterpart and the producer says, well, I was never told to control such and such species, you know, you're going to need to look at that original plan that was signed and approved back in the day, well, you know, whether it was 10, 15 years ago. If you locate evidence in there that it was stated out in their plan, in the appendix, or somewhere, you know, in the forestry plan or whatever, that they were supposed to control that, then that's going to fall back on the producer for not following their plan. Now, if there was no identifiable wording in there, that's where you can have that conversation with NRCS, and it looks like, you know, you guys can come to an agreement that says it looks like we did not clearly instruct that producer to control whatever species it was at that time, and that would be grounds there for you're still, you know, if they're out of compliance, you still got to send them that letter for being out of compliance. But that could be a situation where see FSA or NRCS that the standard payment reduction could look at being waived on that. So, you know, that's going to be a case by case basis. You know, there's we can't really answer that for you guys without, you know, looking at each individual contract that's being looked at. So again, that conversation needs to happen locally. If you can't come to a conclusion and you have questions, just send that up to us and we'll look at them individually. But hopefully you guys can get that worked out locally.
Hey, Jason, I'm on the chat too, and there's a good question. Can you recover the 10% compliance issue? The document we are reviewing now says if 0 to 10% of the contract, but it sounded like you were saying the percent needs to be applied at the field and practice level. Yeah, that is an oversight. That is an error in the document. We will correct that and get that reissued. Last I looked, Jason, you and I are both human.
Yes.
No, thanks for pointing that out. I saw a couple of little things too that I tried to breeze through. It's like, oh shoot, there's another oversight that we'll work to get this cleaned up. So thank you. We've looked at it way too many times. Thank you for pointing that out. And then I may have missed it, but when did you say you guys will provide a status review contract list on the ones being reviewed? Soon. I don't want to give you a date because I will fail, but it will be out soon. Okay, anything else on this document, Jason and or our valued employees?
I don't have anything on that document. We just had another thing pop up here. Would you expect that on efficiency site follow-ups to be conducted by DC FSA, perhaps with partner or not? Who did original review, not just original reviewer?
I think I understand that question, but make sure I address Mary Lou if I don't. I'm trying to. I want to make sure. Let me read it again. Okay, so deficiency site follow-up. I'm going to answer that maybe two ways. One is if we find a deficiency, let's say a partner finds a deficiency, and now it's up to NRCS and FSA jointly to have a conversation of, is that an issue that we need to take issue with? How many times can I use the word issue? I'm sorry. In that case, I would highly recommend that we also bring in the partner who made the original site visit. And again, if needed, all together, all of USDA and our partners go out to the site and visit it again. Make sure that it's the right decision. Now, if the deficiency site follow-up is where the farmer is going to correct the issue and we need technical assistance, again, pull on our partners to help deliver that technical assistance. For example, if it's a field of a pollinator planting that is now tall fescue, we may pull on our partner biologists to help develop the site preparation requirements as well as the seeding recommendations. So it's NRCS's responsibility. If we ask a partner to help, and it's part of a contribution agreement or not, would that part, if it's in the contribution agreement for conservation planning on CRP, then we can reimburse you for that service, and we can go that route that way. I hope that answered your question. So you say not just the reviewer. True. Again, these are USDA programs. We can use our partners to our fullest ability, but when it comes to responsibility, it is the USDA's responsibility to do that, not our valued partners. Okay, that's all we were planning to cover on status reviews guidance. Any final questions before we take a quick 5-minute break and move on to other exciting topics? All right, hearing none, let's take 5 minutes. I have 3:03. Let's make it 3:09. And we'll get started as close to that as possible. Thanks, everybody. See you in 5. Hear you in 5, sorry. Hey, Jason, I can't see the participant list on my Teams for some reason. It's acting up on me. But Toby, have you joined us? Toby Days?
I had admitted him into the meeting towards the beginning.
Okay, good. Maybe he may be on taking the break. Okay, I'll have you do kind of introduce this next topic and Toby and have him introduce himself if you don't mind, Jason.
Yep, that's fine.
Perfect. Got about a minute remaining, everybody. All right, thanks everybody. Welcome back. Jason, we do have a couple more questions that maybe we'll address before we move on to other topics, if you're okay with that.
Yep, I'm good.
Do you want to take the first one from Colette?
Yeah. So going back on the tile hole, if only one tile hole is notated on the status review, that contract is considered to be out of compliance. It's not in compliance. It's going to be out of compliance, and they're going to get the normal non-compliance letter. We're just not going to assess a standard payment reduction for one tile hole. We start the standard payment reduction on tile holes at 2 or more. And again, we're going to push out that information on how the standard payment reduction is applied to there. But just to let you know, it's 25% of the annual rental payment per acre times 2 for 2 or more tile holes. So again, it's out of compliance. They're just not assessed a penalty for one, and they're still obviously still out of compliance if it's 2 or more, but then they get the assessed penalty.
I'll take the next one from Jenny. Along with the 10% unapproved species clarification, if the unapproved species are throughout the field and above 10%, would it be acceptable to call the whole field out of compliance? A little bit different than the fescue example. Yeah, and again, Jenny, that's a really good question. And that's, again, where document what we see and then have that conversation with FSA locally and any other partners that were involved and come up with a joint decision on which, how severe is that and what's the appropriate compliance call there. Yeah, good question. Again, I can't answer that question as 100%. Always do it this way. I would say have that conversation, come to a joint agreement, and then move forward together. All right. Oops, we got one more just popped in. Okay, here, that's a good question, Andrew. Andrew Brown asked for the 9/30/24, September 30th, 2024 expiring practices that we are looking at this year, where it's still a full 2 years until they expire. Do we assume that they will stay in compliance and be eligible to re-enroll without having to go back out and look at them again closer to expiration? The answer is yes. National policy does allow us, if we look at a contract 1 to 2 years before it expires and all is good, we do not have to make another site visit for the re-enrollment. We still do have to go through the conservation planning process, but we can base that conservation planning process based on the status review that we completed if it's no older than 2 years before expiration. And we'll cover that in the re-enroll planning guidance when we send that out. Good question, Andrew. Much like the establishment status review, we don't have to make a site visit if we just recently re-enrolled it and all was looking good. And again, locally, this is a joint decision locally to not require a site visit. All right, great questions. Let's move on. I want to introduce a new topic, and Jason, you want to start us out on that?
Yes, and before we do, let's see, is Toby, are you able to unmute yourself? Just want to make sure when I turn it over to you that you'll be able to talk to us. All right. I'm having trouble getting my participant list to spread out so I can see who all is on here as well. So Toby either can't get off mute or he may have had to have jumped off for other reasons. But next topic we're going to talk about, I'll kind of cover it a little bit from the FSA side, was 2 documents that I sent out yesterday. One was a joint memo and then also a brochure that is concentrating towards source water protection areas. As we all know, when the new Farm Bill came out on the FSA side and on the NRCS side, there's a huge push towards source water protection across the U.S., not just Indiana. That was very evident from on the FSA side with Clear 30 and some of the additional incentives that we have going on for our water quality practices. In the joint memo that we sent out to NRCS and FSA, now some of you may know Toby Days. I have been working with Toby since I started here at the state office. Toby works for Alliance of Indiana Rural Water, and FSA nationally across the U.S. has had contract agreements in each state with individuals to help promote for source water protection or protect our drinking water resources. And Toby has been under contract with FSA here in Indiana since 2007. So quite a long time. We're looking at about 15 years. Some of you I know have worked with Toby over the phone and in person. He's probably visited your office before to get some information on landowners' contact information, producers' contact information. And what Toby does, and I hope he's able to hop on here if he can, but he works with a lot of the district water companies across the state. He also works with landowners and farmers that are in wellhead areas, water protection areas, to talk to them about things that they can do to enhance the protection of our drinking water here in Indiana. For the FSA side, that is going to involve some of our HELI practices, but more specifically our wellhead practices under continuous CRP, and then also as well as some of our regular continuous practices, filter strips, waterways, riparians as well. So also if Toby it happens to reach out to a local office, if you've not worked with Toby before, again, he travels across the state working with these water districts in our local offices. If he does reach out to you, we can share FSA any information that he is looking for, names, addresses, contact information, with him, since he is contracted with us nationally with FSA USDA. So again, there's no issues with us sharing maps or anything with Toby. A lot of times what he will come in looking for is certain like wellhead areas, looking for contact information in those specific areas. And a lot of times he'll work here with Chris Soonpaw and myself here at the state office to Chris is able to get him a nice quick list of contact information for him to reach out to those producers. So I'm going to give one more shot here before I turn it over to you, Shannon, see if Toby was able to unmute or if he's on with us today. Not sounding good. So Shannon, I'll let you view it from the NRCS side.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Yeah, echoing what Jason said, we have a priority in our Farm Bill programs for source water protection areas as well. And I guess I have to say that's outstanding. But our service to those farmers and to those communities can be much bigger than the 10% Farm Bill funding, right? If there is a hot target location locally where farmers and non-farmers can really come together, it is where the non-farmer is drinking the water coming off the farmer's farm, right? So again, we just want to kind of put this out there as a joint statement that, hey, we strongly encourage all USDA employees and our partners to work with your local water utility districts and establish a partnership, establish a relationship, and work together to make sure that we can improve the water quality coming off of all of our USDA clients' farms. Just a couple pieces of information as well. As Jason mentioned, if you need a mailing list to reach out to these farmers, reach out to Chris Sumpa and Jason, and they can help you with that. But there are other data that we have that we can use, and I'll kind of go through some of that here real quick. If I can get this out of here. Okay, there we go. First, let me go over the brochure first. So again, we put this brochure together just to help our clients understand why it's important and what might be available to them. We have Toby's contact information on here and some other good stuff. And I know Toby has developed quite a few good materials that he's shared. But let us know at the state office. We'll do our best to deliver what you need. This is information that I'm sharing that is actually protected. Okay, and I think everyone can probably understand why it's important that these are not publicly available. Again, a lot of people use these areas to pull from their drinking water, and it wouldn't take much to really mess that up for some not nice people if they got a hold of these data. So I'm just going to speak to this real quick. This is, and for NRCS, this is what we use in 2020 for our source water protection area work in EQIP and CSP and others. FSA, this has the wellhead data that you have, plus surface drinking waters where a community is pulling their drinking water from a surface reservoir or other surface water, river or other, okay? So this is kind of a complete list. NRCS employees, you have access to this data, or will have access to these data. If Chris Morris is on, he might be able to better explain that. We can use it to kind of identify is this farm in or not in a source water protection area, whether it's again a wellhead designated area or a surface water drinking watershed. And again, that you can do that for your conservation planning efforts and other targeting efforts. FSA, you all have these data, the wellheads at least. And now, Jason, if you want to speak to the data use agreements and things.
Yes, yeah, we just have access to the wellheads, and anybody who has access to that in Indiana has had to fill out a confidentiality agreement that gets sent up here to myself and Stephanie, and we forward that on to IDEM for them to sign off and approve that. And then that's when we turn around, we work with, we give you instructions on how to access that wellhead layer. So on the FSA side, that confidentiality agreement, we cannot, just like Shannon said, this is very secure information. We are not to share that wellhead layer with anybody. If somebody comes in and says, I want to see your layer of wellheads, that cannot be released whatsoever. So, but that's the only layer that we have access to on our side.
Okay, like I mentioned, we as Jason mentioned, we did get these data from IDEM, and they have entrusted USDA to keep them for internal use only. So again, I think we all understand that, and again, we will work together to. And other partners out there. Again, they won't likely be viewable, but they will be usable through GIS applications. Okay, so these are the true wellhead protection areas and surface drinking water areas as identified by IDEM and also US EPA. And IDEM said they may have some updated data that they'll be getting us. So again, we will make that available to you through Chris Morris and Chris Sumpa here in the near future. For NRCS folks, you may be familiar with this map. This again is where our national headquarters is pulling credit for that 10% requirement of the Farm Bill. This is these data, okay? I guess I have to say these are important for our programs and for our national goal. But like I said, our priority should be bigger than these data here. I'm not going to go into the detail of how these data came about. We followed a national process. This is what they asked for. We had to limit it to no more than 20% of Indiana where we take credit. we know there's a lot of communities pulling water from way more areas than this, because you just saw where how widely dispersed these are. Anyways, you have access to these data. I would suggest not targeting or focusing only on these data, but rather working in partnership with the local water utilities and FSA and other partners where you have any of these in your communities. And hopefully you already know where those are, and we can establish some good relationships there. Again, just back to the memo. There is a public website that IDEM manages, that if an individual is interested to know if they are in a wellhead or a surface drinking water area, we can point them to that website. And again, they can't see the data, but they can put in there, where on the earth they are interested to know, and they will get a yes/no answer, that yes, you are in a wellhead protection area or surface drinking watershed, or you are not. Okay. We talked about PII. Again, it's the same thing applies. But again, where we can work with our partners, non-USDA partners. If you have any questions on what data can or can't be shared, float those up to the state office. We'll get you your answer. Talked about the brochure, and again, just some ideas of how we can work together. Getting on these water companies have meetings and things with their stakeholders. If we establish a relationship, we can make sure that they are aware of what's available for farmers, and they can have that consistent message. We can work together on workshops, field days. All the farmers who do impact a community's drinking water is aware of that, and those opportunities available to them. And again, we have Toby's contact information there, and as Jason mentioned, if he reaches out to you, just know that he is legit. He's awesome, and you have approval from the state offices to work with him as best as possible. And again, we've heard all kinds of great stories of how you all are currently working with Toby. But if you have not, we encourage you to build that partnership. Comments or questions on this joint memo? Toby, one last chance. By chance, were you able to say a few words? I did see Toby on a participant list. Maybe something's not working well with his connections. All right. Seeing no further questions, or did I miss? Nope. Seeing no further questions, we will move on to the next topic. That is going to be bear with me while I get this moving. Okay. Our NRCS employees, if you joined us earlier today, you already heard this message, but I'm going to make sure that our FSA counterparts are aware of what we're doing for compliance here, starting now. Again, a topic is called compliance status reviews, and hopefully all of you know that as part of the Food Security Act, we are required, USDA is required to receive reports from farmers on a 1026 that they are self-certifying that they are in compliance with highly erodible land and wetland compliance. But we are also required to do status reviews, compliance status reviews on a certain subset of our USDA client tracks. So we are required to do this by law, and it's something that we have been doing actually since 1985, but we do this kind of internally, I guess, and then we don't normally involve too much with FSA, but you all are integral parts of this, especially when we find issues of non-compliance on HEL and wetland. Okay, it's just some again, we try to, this is a huge workload. Again, we've already talked about this tremendous amount of workload for CRP. This also is another huge workload. And this is also where we can sometimes have an unfun answer to our clients. They've been getting farm benefits for a long time, and along comes USDA on the farm and says, hey, you are not following your compliance requirements. And then we have to have the unfun conversations and go forward. However, we do try to we do put a positive spin on this, because this is actually an excellent opportunity to reach farmers with a consistent conservation message. tillage, their crop rotation, etc. Verify that wetlands are still out there as they're supposed to be, and also check for erosion, and then work with that farmer to correct those issues. So again, just some really cool things that we find as a result of our compliance activities. You know, here's a farm with a grass waterway coming right at the camera here, but also the farm itself is planted to wheat. So this farmer is using a diverse crop rotation with a small grain plus a grass waterway to keep the erosion under control on this highly erodible CLU. Here's another one. Indiana is a national leader in cover crops, and we're real proud of that. And we see this all over Indiana. If there is a farm or a field that could be a priority for cover crops, it would be a highly erodible field. I mean, that's cover crops protect that soil through the fall and winter, build the soil structure, control erosion, and all the other great benefits that cover crops bring to our farmers out there. Here's a farm where this is a direct result of our compliance. And I'll go into this in a little more detail. Farmers are required through the Food Security Act to control what we call ephemeral gullies. These are erosional areas that normally form each year, but a farmer can disc through them and kind of make them disappear until it rains again, and they form right back. These are a lot of places, a lot of these areas where we have grass waterways, and we're all familiar with that practice. But again, farmers are required to treat those if they have a highly erodible CLU. And this is one of our options that we've given to farmers, that they can plant cover crops in these ephemeral gully areas. And that's part of their conservation plan now to remain in compliance. And again, I wish I had an aerial view of this field, because there's this snaking of cover crops seeded throughout this field where there were ephemeral gullies. And again, that farmer has taken that conservation measure, and that's really cool to see. And another one, here's a farm where the farmer installed water and sediment control basins. Again, that's another practice that can control ephemeral gullies and also sheet and rill erosion. And this farmer, I don't know if this was USDA installed or not, but this farmer has wasp cobs throughout their field to control that ephemeral gully, and that keeps them in compliance, and also keeps that sediment from entering the streams and other great benefits that we get from that practice. Any questions so far? Oh, thanks, Katie. I agree. Keep going. Okay, thanks. So we'll move on. So for our compliance status review process, we consider it a 7-step process. The first step in that is we have to review certain tracks for USDA participants. These come to us from national headquarters. I hope that our national headquarters at NRCS works with the national headquarters at FSA, but I have found through my career that I don't think, Jason, I don't think you get any word from your headquarters that this has gone on. This has traditionally been an NRCS exercise. Anyways, someone up there pulls out all the USDA client tracks and randomly selects a subset of those. And so we have that list. It's in a national database. Here in Indiana, there are 621 tracks on that list for 2022 that needs to have a compliance status review completed. So again, you can see that workload. In our Indiana process, we do require our district conservationist to review that list by county with the CED, FSA, and verify that each person on that list, each tract on that list is still a USDA participant. We have some folks decide, hey, I don't need your money, I'm out. That's great. We will find a replacement for that tract if that's the case. But we do want to have that conversation with you at FSA, because you may know information about these farmers that we may not be too familiar with. We also have a list of USDA employees. And again, by the Food Security Act, we are required to, I don't want to say give special attention, but we have a separate requirement to also evaluate USDA employees who own and operate farms and make sure they are in compliance. Now, I got to say, I really, really hope we hardly ever find any issues with a USDA employee being out of compliance, but I know it can happen. And I'll show you what that list looks like here real quick. We do require our DC to sit down with you and this list as FSA and review the list. We know that most of these members on this list are county committee members, and who knows your current county committee membership better than Farm Service Agency. So we do require that we look at this and make sure that we don't inadvertently review a person because they were on our USDA employee list and they're no longer even associated with USDA as a county committee member or other employee. And then we also have another list of tracks that we need to look at and run that by you. And these are tracks that may have been reinstated for eligibility. So again, we found an issue in the past. The farmer worked with us to get back in compliance. We do have to last year, we do have to go out and do a status review on those tracks as well. Here's just a screenshot of our USDA employee list. Again, I hid employee name, farm track number because of PII. But anyways, we will be sharing this list with you and verifying that it is correct. And then choosing, we have a process to choose which tracks to look at from a USDA employee standpoint as well. These are mostly Farm Service Agency county committee members that are on this list. We know we have NRCS employees, maybe some other Farm Service Agency employees who operate farmland in the county. We are also supposed to look at those once every 3 years. One track once every 3 years of what they operate. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions on who we will be looking at this year. Okay, I see some questions about CRP. We'll tackle those after we're done with this conversation. Moving on, step 2. This is where we do notify our participants that their track will be reviewed. We do have to do this in writing. We have some form letters, and when we say in writing, that could be either mail, U.S. mail, or email, or hand deliver. But we do have to notify the participant within so many days of when we expect to be on their farm to evaluate their cropping system in compliance with wetlands. And we're sharing this with you because farmers may not be familiar with this. This may be the first year they've gotten reviewed, and they may be asking you questions. So we want to make sure, again, that all of USDA understands what's going on here. The next step is the office file review. So this was where we may be having some NRCS employees, if our case files are not quite as complete as we think they should be, we may be asking to access to your files before we go out on the farm, just to make sure we have as clear of a picture of past determinations, past issues, past great stuff before we start doing our field review. The key one here too is we are I don't know if everyone can hear that lady talking when someone joins. I don't know, it's just me. We do look at the 85, 86 slide compared to the current imagery. Again, before we go out to the field, if we saw a woods in 85 and no woods today and no determination that says they had the ability to do so, that's a particular part of the farm that we want to take a look at to make sure that a wetland or a sod bust or some other has not happened. Some of our CLUs in our random track list are UHEL, so we also will be working with you to verify is that a UHEL because of a slight CLU boundary change. Recently split or combined fields, and we actually need to do a new determination on that. So the fourth step is when we go out on site. If you're familiar with this process, way back in the good old, not the good old, way back in the old days, because I don't think they were all that great, we used to measure residue. Okay, for the most part anymore, farmers are not governed, if you will. I don't like that word. Farmers are not measured on how much residue they have on their fields anymore. It's actually, most of our compliance is measured by our revised universal soil loss equation nowadays. However, if a farmer still has one of those old residue plans for compliance and they have it in their possession, it's not just in the case file. If they actually say, this is how I operate my farm based on what you gave me way back before 1996, then we will measure residue, and that will be our unit of measure for compliance. Otherwise, we're looking at the farmer's cropping system. What's their typical tillage? What's their typical crop rotation? Do they use cover crops? So on and so forth. We use that information in our model to verify if they're within tolerable soil loss limits. Also, when we're out there on the site, again, when we notify the farmer, we also tell them, hey, you need to tell us how you manage your farm. again, what's the type of tillage, what's the timing of the tillage, what's your crop rotation. This sort of information is what we need to run our Russell 2 model. If a farmer comes and says, "Hey, I always no-till, and I always use cover crops," but if we get out there on a site review and it looks like this, we might need to have a conversation to say, "Hey, you said you're no-till, but here's what I saw," and then we can have that conversation about, okay, was this a unique year? Did you have some need to use tillage versus when you typically don't? They wouldn't lie to us, so we don't go there. But anyways, we can work with them to figure out why this may have happened this year versus not, and come up with some variance codes for them. We're also looking for these ephemeral gullies, and again, you probably understand what these are. And again, if these are on, even if this was the first year that ephemeral gully showed up because of a unique weather event or whatever you want to call it, that is a non-compliance issue. But we do have we have a series of variances we can use with farmers to get them back into compliance, and that's what one of these would be. Hey, next year after harvest, you need to plant cover crops in that ephemeral gully area, and correct it. Otherwise, I will have to take issue with you. I'd mentioned that one farmer had installed wasp cobs to control ephemerals, but we do need to check to make sure any structures that the farmer has installed are being maintained accordingly to continue to control that erosion. So here's just an extreme example of a terrace that has some maintenance needs. And then we also verify that any wetlands that are identified any wetlands on the farm are being managed accordingly in compliance with the Food Security Act. And then finally, if we do find an issue on a farm, like say last year, if we found an ephemeral gully on a farm, we give that farmer a variance. But the variance is not a get out of jail free card. The variance is to correct the issue that we have identified. And then so we do have to review those tracks again. So again, that's another bit of workload. That if we found issues last year, we need to verify that the farmer corrected those issues. Step 5 is where we make the decision. Again, now we've received the farmer's cropping information, we've been to the field, and now we put that information into our revised universal soil loss equation and other processes, and we make a decision. The big thing here too is our decision has to be based off of the past cropping system the farmer used. If the farmer used heavy tillage on highly erodible land, and we find them that they're not within tolerable soil loss limits, and they say, well, I promise I'm going to go to no-till this year. It's like, okay, well, that's great. But we still have an issue from the past. So all of our decisions are based on the historic cropping systems that the farmer did, not on what they plan to do in the future. But again, that's where we use this process to say, hey, you may be out of compliance now. Let's find a way to get you back in compliance. Because we want you to be a USDA program participant. We want you to control your erosion and protect your wetlands and manage accordingly to the law. Let's work with you to make that happen. And again, that's where we see the value in this exercise. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but again, there is a difference between land that was cropped prior to December 23, 1985, compared to land that was technically sod busted. Land brought into production from native vegetation after December 23, 1985. There's different levels of measurement. So I'll just go through this real briefly for our FSA partners out there. Through our revised universal soil loss equation, that will give us an annual estimate of tons of sediment lost per acre per year. And we have this thing that we call T, capital T, and it stands for tolerable soil loss. Each soil has its own unique tolerable soil loss number. If a farmer farmed that ground if that land was farmed prior to 85, we run the revised universal soil loss equation. If they are eroding less than 2 times the tolerable soil loss limit, they are in compliance. Okay, from that part of compliance. Likewise, if they don't have ephemeral gullies and if they have been maintaining their wetlands accordingly, now that's what we're looking for. That's actively applying a system, and we move on. Anything less than that or more, any more erosion than that, or ephemeral gullies are existing, now we have to use an adverse determination. And again, we have a process that we can hopefully grant a variance to those farmers and get them back on track, or we may have to say, hey, there's no hope for you. You are out of compliance. And again, that's where you all will be brought into that conversation, Farm Service Agency, because we'll be getting a 569, requesting a 569 on those farms. If land was farmed after December 23, 1985, those farmers are held to a higher standard. They are only allowed to be eroding less than 1 times that T value. Okay. Here in Indiana, I think I can confidently say we have very productive soils. Most of our soils probably average a T of 4. So land farmed prior to 85 can be eroding at 8 tons to the acre. If you're not familiar with what that means, that's a lot of tons. But they are in compliance. However, again, we do take this opportunity to talk about conservation planning and helping that farmer know that, hey, yeah, you're in compliance, but you're losing a lot of sediment. Your productivity level has got to be suffering if it's not already. So let's work together and see if we can stop, reduce your tillage, incorporate cover crops, do some other things on your land. Again, Zach, if we have that alternative conservation system in hand, the farmer does, then we will measure compliance based on that plan and the residues that we measure. In all cases, we are now adding this plan addendum to all conservation plans for compliance. We've been doing this for probably 5 years or so now. Our hope is that eventually, by doing these annual status reviews and new determinations, we do send us out with new determinations as well, that we will be informing farmers of the need to control ephemeral gullies and the options they have to do so. Again, we lose a lot of sediment through these ephemeral gullies, and there's options that we can work with farmers, a stepwise process, but these do become an official part of that HEL compliance plan now. After we make that decision, now we need to notify the participant. It's our Indiana policy and process that if we have an adverse that we deliver that message in person. We don't want to send a black and white message that's not friendly. This is happening on your farm. Let's talk. Let's figure out, can we get you a variance? Can we get you some technical assistance to correct those issues and get you back into compliance? So just want to make sure that that's clear as well. And when I say in person, that can be over the phone, but it is not just a letter. We do send an official letter, so they have it in writing, but it is also, we want to have that conversation. If it's a non-adverse decision, we just send it and tell the farmer, great job. We'll talk to you next chance we get. There's a final step, and I think I deleted it, and I didn't mean to. Step 7 is where we enter these data into a national database and report that back to our national headquarters. So any questions on compliance status reviews? I'm not seeing any in the chat, Jason, so I think we can start wrapping up. I think we do have some questions back on CRP.
Yes, and I did put a response in there regarding the one question. It said, going back to the LTP with deficiencies, are 0% participants considered shareholders for deficiency contact purposes? And I just put the note out of paragraph 603 and 2 CRP. It states CRP participants with 0 interest in the annual rental payment are not responsible for contract compliance. So I put that's straight out of 2 CRP for that question on there. And I think that was the only one that had popped up.
All right, we'll pause here for a little while, see if there's any other questions, or and especially if we happen to have missed a question that you posted on chat, make sure we get you your answer. All right. Well, hearing none, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Looks like there may be some weather, at least where I am here in Brownsburg, and hopefully everybody stays safe and healthy. Okay, we see a question. Was there also a non-compliance letter available? For our For Food Security Act compliance, yes, there is. I don't know if that's related to that or for CRP. For CRP. Jason, I'll let you tackle that question.
I think we have some non-compliance example letters on SharePoint. I have to go in there just to make sure, but I think there should be some example ones. We don't have a standard one that is all inclusive on that. Shannon, are you still there?
Oh, sorry. Any other questions come in? I don't think so, did they?
No.
Okay. All right. So, hey, thanks everyone. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate your attention. As questions come up, float those up to your next levels at the DDs and area offices and state office. And if we don't know the answer off the top of our heads, we will work together and get you one for consistency. And we also expect additional guidance to come out. Jason just off the top of my head, CRP planning, cost lists, some of these other things that we need for new offers and re-enrolled offers. We'll be getting that out to you as soon as we can. Let us know any training you all need. We'll do our best to deliver. And other than that, hope you have fun with all this workload and stay safe. And I look forward to seeing the great accomplishments that you all get done out there. It's much appreciated, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.